Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, friends of the Bruno Kreisky Forum. I'm very pleased that you join us for this conversation, which is taking place in the framework of the series on hegemonies and alliances that our friend Walter Posch is curating at the forum since many years. And in the framework of this series, we met also many years ago, Ambassador Selim Yenel, who was ambassador in Vienna. And we had the pleasure to host you at the Kreisky Forum at that time. I want to extend a very, very warm welcome to you, Ambassador Yenel, dear Selim. I'm very pleased that you join us tonight. Ambassador Selim Yenel was then ambassador to the EU and is now the president of the Istanbul-based think tank Global Relations Forum, which I'm looking forward very much to cooperate with in the coming months and in the coming years with all the programs that we have on our plate. I wanted to mention also the title of tonight's talk, The Turkish Trial and Errors. We borrowed it from the International Crisis Group that had a conversation with Ambassador Selim Yenel some time ago, and that I found very inspiring for our talk tonight. So thank you also, International Crisis Group, for providing us a good title. Walter Posch is a senior fellow at the Institute for Peace Support and Conflict Management, and as I mentioned before, the program director of Hegemonies and Alliances at the Kreisky Forum. I would not steal more time to a very interesting debate that we are expecting, and I thank you both for joining us tonight, and I wish our public a very interesting and inspiring debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gertrud. Thank you, Ambassador Yenel, to join us. Ambassador Selim Yenel looks back to a very esteemed career in both the Turkish Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Turkish Ministry of EU Affairs. He held several high-rank diplomatic positions in Europe, inter alia, as Gertrud mentions, as ambassador to Austria, but also in Brussels. He was permanent representative of Turkey. And since 2020, he heads, I guess, the Global Relations Forum in Istanbul. Ambassador dear Selim, we are very happy to welcome you at this webinar. And what we try to do in the next hour is to give, starting with an overview on Turkish foreign policy in general, to look into the changes of the last years and into the future. I would like to add that in the last 2 or 3 years, we had both from an European, but also sometimes from a Turkish viewpoint, at least if we only follow newspapers, almost a deterioration of relations. Much of it, at closer scrutiny, is on the atmospheric level, remained on the emotional level. The impression is that basic patterns of Turkish foreign policy have not changed, but perhaps attitudes in the West towards Turkish politics have changed, or haven't they? Fact is that we saw among scholars on Turkey, in diplomatic circle, some kind of necessity for a restart on taking talk of where are we. Ambassador, I would like to welcome you and ask you to give us a little bit of an overview, and then we can go into details. Thank you very much.
Vielen Dank, and thank you very much for Gertrude and you, Walter. I'm very honored to be back to Bruno Kreisky Forum, even if it's on a virtual basis. I've been there many times when I was in Vienna, and also I joined from Brussels as well to talk about Turkish-EU relations at that time. So I'm very pleased to be back with you, even if it's on a virtual manner. I'll try to give you an overview of Turkish foreign policy. And it would be an understatement to say that our foreign policy has changed in the last 30 years. And it has changed in a dramatic fashion as well. And I might have to confess that it's not for the better. That's why you might have noticed that we have now, for the last few weeks, a charm offensive regarding the EU, Greece and France, among others, in an effort to overcome the isolation that Turkey is feeling these days. But it will take a lot of efforts and a lot of time. But let me explain how we got here in the first place. As I said, our foreign policy has evolved in the last 30 years. And it started soon after the end of the Cold War. I mean, during the Cold War, the only major concern for Turkey was Cyprus. And I remember this very vividly because when I was stationed in the 80s in the UN, the only subject that we were concerned about was Cyprus. We would hardly get any instructions on any other issue for that matter. So this was the Cold War era. And of course, things were black and white, divided into spheres. And so it was basically much more easy to do foreign policy because you knew where you stood. But with the end of the Cold War, of course, some possibilities and opportunities arose because the Soviet Union collapsed. The US was not as interested in certain areas as before. So Turkey had started to having a more outward foreign policy. But this was not only for Turkey, of course, but for many other countries. But Turkey did not have the economic means at that time to fulfill its more active foreign policy. It wanted to do it because there was more opportunities, I said so, but it did not have the means. But when we came to the 2000s, because in 1995, we had our customs union with the EU, and then we had a dramatic earthquake in Turkey in 1999. And in the year 2000, we had an economic crisis. So we had to go to the IMF, we had stringent policies. And soon after 2000 until 2005, we made a lot of progress economically. And this was our period in which we also were getting much closer to the EU because we are now a candidate. So we're having reforms, not only in the political sphere, but also in the economic area. So we were having new, regulatory bodies, independent bodies, and we were following very, very stringent policies. And so Turkey, started to get better economically as well. And also Turkey became more and more, let's say, ambitious in its foreign policy, because as I said, there was now more opening. I remember that Turkey became more interested in Africa as well, not only in its immediate neighborhood. And we have started to open embassies all over the world. Right now, for example, we're, I think, number 5 in having embassies around the world. This is an ongoing trend. And I think that this will go on until we're in the top 3 or so. That's the ambition. It doesn't mean that we're working better, but it means that we have more embassies. Now, and of course, during that time, we also started to give development aid as well. For a while, I remember before all this difficulty happened for Turkey, Turkey was amongst the top 5 giving development aid to a lot of countries, especially in Africa, Somalia, and other places. And I can say that up until the year 2007 and even 2009, it was the golden years of our foreign policy. Yes, we had difficulties with the EU. Although we were a candidate and we had open negotiations, we had difficulty because Cyprus had become a member. Germany and France had caused some problems because they didn't want Turkey to become a member. I remember Angela Merkel and President Sarkozy making these statements. But nevertheless, Turkey had its own hubris at that time. And so it did not really bother us that much at that time. Again, the prime minister, who is now the president, Erdogan, for example, was following a different kind of foreign policy. I don't know if you would remember, but this is something that is unthinkable right now. Turkey tried to broker a peace deal between Syria and Israel at the time. And for example, right now, we don't have any relations with those 2 countries. So that was a different period. When we were being more and more active, we were also being charged. I remember when I was the foreign minister, we were being charged of moving away from the West. This was not the truth because Turkey was now being more, let's say, active. But this was because of the end of the Cold War. And it was not moving away from the West. It was only acting like a middle power, like many other countries, and had different kind of relations with this and that country. But it was still in the sphere of the West. It was, you know, still is a NATO country. It was, you know, very, very trying to get very close to the EU, but it was more and more independent. And we used to give the, you know, the comparison with France or Germany. I mean, France and Germany, even though they are in the EU, they have their independent foreign policies at times. So when did the changes start in our foreign policy? Basically, I can put it around, as I said, 2009, because in 2007, the foreign minister Gül became president. And in 2009, Davutoğlu, who became prime minister later on, became foreign minister. And then we started to have a more ideological foreign policy. That's when I think it started. I can name that period. 2010, 2011, dramatic things happened. For us, especially with the Mavi Marmara incident, you know, the ship that was sailing from Turkey to the Palestinians, and the Israeli Navy boarded it, and we had people die. And so our relationship with Israel started to go down from then. In 2011, we had the Arab popular movements, and we supported these movements. But the problem there was Turkey was supporting the Muslim Brotherhood. So this is a very important point. I remember when I was in the foreign ministry, that was the first time I heard the Arab word for it, Ikhwan. That's what they were calling it. And our foreign minister was using it very often. But I didn't, you know, understand the subtlety of it. But then later on, I understood that this was something that was very important to the government. It was more ideological support to this group. And of course, the Muslim Brotherhood had won the elections in Egypt. And subsequently, when they were deposed by Sisi, our relationship with Egypt went down the drain as well. And Turkey still supports the Muslim Brotherhood in several places. And that has soured our relationship with basically most of the Middle Eastern countries. So right now, the only country in the area that supports Turkey or we have good relations is Qatar. At that time, of course, we had, as I said, problems within the EU. Cyprus had become a member and had stopped most of our chapters from moving forward. But right now, I mean, when that happened, Turkey was still feeling confident, sometimes overconfident in its capabilities. This was still the years of 2011 because we still had a growing economy. We were still considered to be popular. We were elected to the Security Council. So we still all that had that hubris in us. A few words on Russia. Russia is a very interesting case because Russia has been a very, very old adversary, starting from the Ottoman Empire and even with the Republic. Now, ever since Putin and Erdogan have come to power, the relationship has been quite close. Although, when you consider the Caucasus, the Balkans, Syria, Libya, or Cyprus, we hardly agree on any of these issues. And we don't accept the annexation of Crimea. Nevertheless, our relationship is personal. The presidents get along very well. Although a few years ago we had shot down their plane, again, we have managed to overcome the difficulties. It's all because of the personal chemistry between the two presidents. And we have energy deals. And of course, the more controversial issues is Turkey buying S-400 surface-to-air missiles. We can get into that later on. Mm-hmm. But I just wanted to point out that our relationship with Russia is different than what it used to be. Our relationship with the US has always been fractured. It has gone from good to bad. It has been a roller coaster, you might say. Our relationship with basically the EU and the US has changed to the worse, especially after the coup attempt of 2016. Now, if you remember in 2015 and early 2016, Turkey had deals with the EU with regarding the migration crisis. And that was a time in which we thought that we were making headway regarding putting our relationship with the EU back on the track. Because the 2016 agreement of 18 March did not only entail the migration crisis, it also had in it the accession process, visa liberalization, modernizing the customs union, having more and more high-level contacts, summits, etc. Now, in July 2016, ever since that happened, things just went from bad to worse. Turkey felt abandoned, rightly or wrongly, because there was not much support from the EU regarding what has happened afterwards. Although the EU says that they, of course, immediately condemned the coup attempt, nevertheless, there was a feeling in Turkey that it was not strong enough. We can get back into that later on if you wish. And of course, after the coup attempt, there was a lot of, let's say, decisions taken by Turkish authorities, and fundamental rights, freedom of speech, all these things were being heavily criticized by the EU and the US. And moreover, the US was harboring the alleged mastermind of the coup attempt. So that also had created difficulties for us with regard to our US relationship. So Turkey became more and more isolated with regard to its foreign policies. If you look around us, within the Middle East, as I said, only Qatar is our partner. The relationship between Israel and Egypt have gone down. We have embassies, but at the lower level representation. And I think that we have pushed those two countries into the arms of Greece and Cyprus. If you look at what has happened in the Eastern Mediterranean in the last few months, these countries have gathered together. They have even created a forum, an energy forum, including Italy. And all this has, of course, done at the expense of Turkey. And I think that Cyprus has felt more and more assured, having the back of the EU and also Israel and Egypt, to take some more action. And then Turkey, of course, responded. Because let me be very frank here, Cyprus knows which buttons to push. They know how we will react. And once that happens, we react in a, let's say, more assertive fashion that does not go well down in other countries. So Turkey has felt all this and its relationship with our neighborhood. So only Russia and Qatar seem to be, in our good graces. The relationship with EU had gone also in a very negative way. If you've seen the last two summit declarations, Turkey is considered to be a third country. It has, it is being criticized, not because of its accession process or what it's done with regard to the human rights or fundamental rights. It's being criticized because of what's happening in the Eastern Mediterranean. As I said, it's being treated as a third country. This is a first. We're not even considered to be a candidate anymore. So that is why I've seen that the last 4 to 5 weeks or even 6 weeks, Turkey has now started a charm offensive to change all this, to change and overcome its isolation. It's not going to be easy, but Turkey has, I think that the foreign minister has gone to Brussels only recently. They've invited, foreign leaders to Turkey with Macron. We've also had a very icy relationship at presidential level. Nevertheless, they have also started to cool down, both of them, the rhetoric. They've written each other letters. And I think that things will get better soon. We started exploratory talks with Greece, and the UN has started or has invited the parties to get together on Cyprus. So all these, when you combine them, gives us a way out of this isolation. But whether we can, make this sustainable is an open question. It's not going to be easy. And now that we have the Biden administration in power in the US, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be much different than the Trump administration, especially with regard to the S-400s. That is going to be a very tricky issue. We bought them from Russia. We said that we will use them. And how we're going to handle it, because the first, let's say, sanction, as we might call it, was that Turkey was pushed off the F-35 fighter jet program, in which parts of it are also built in Turkey. And also we expect further sanctions if we don't handle it well. So basically, that's the overview of our relationship on foreign policy. As I said, it has changed in the last 30 years. It has evolved. It was evolving in a better way, but then it has become more and more ideological, more and more personal. So we have to go back to our basics, our classic foreign policy: peace at home, peace abroad. Doesn't mean that we should be, that we're not going to be involved in other issues. Yes, we will be involved, but not in a way that we have seen lately. So I think I should stop here, and then we can go into the Q&A and go further into detail of all those things that I mentioned or not mentioned, because there are so many things that we talk about that I might also have missed some as well.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just, one of your last remarks struck me, which you previously also touched upon. That was this change of Turkish foreign policy. You had this solid rock foreign policy between East and West, and then you mentioned this ideological, this friendship to the Ikhwan, to the Muslim Brotherhood, and at the same time personal relations based approach of all people with Putin of Russia. Who neither of this seems coordinated because the Ikhwan's approach in the rather, I would say, moderate Islamist reading means, well, we go for elections, for human rights, and then we come to power in a way. So Westernization helps us, which is not necessarily the policies Mr. Putin would follow. How much do you think are these do these two inheritances of foreign policy behavior or structured foreign policy, how strong are they as of today, and are they ever put in a common narrative, or are they just a sideshow? Can they be ignored, or will this be forming parameters for Turkish foreign policy?
Well, I find it very difficult if we have actually a strategy in our foreign policy right now. It seems that we are more and more reactive to what's going on. We've seen that in Libya, in Syria. With regard to Egypt, let me give an example. When Morsi came to power, the Turkish government sent some representatives to tell him and explain to him how he should manage the development, because the Muslim Brotherhood did not have any experience. And I remember Erdogan at that time went there and talked about secularism. Imagine that. I mean, and he said that, you should do things in a secular way, distance yourselves from this and that. He tried to make the Muslim Brotherhood more and more, let's say, representative. But those advices were not taken, and we've seen what happened later on. But afterwards, once Morsi was deposed, Erdogan took it very personal. He also criticized the EU and Westerners that the Sisi regime or the coup was not criticized in a very prominent way, because I think that he also thought that if it happened to him, this would be the same reaction from the EU, and this is what he also felt when the coup attempt happened in 2016. Now, with regard to Syria, everybody thought, a lot of people thought at least, that Assad would go in a few months.
Yes.
That was the common, let's say, view. Of course, that did not happen for two basic reasons. Iran helped Assad on the ground, and Russia helped Assad on the international field. It stopped any international, let's say, UN involvement. And after Obama failed to move ahead on its promises, or it's what he said with regard to the chemical action, Russian started to move into Syria, and now we have a Russian, let's say, involvement in Syria that will stay there. So Turkey was all reacting to these events, especially with regard to ISIS, what's happening in the Kurdish part of Syria. So I don't think that we have basically a strategy other than to preserve Turkish sovereignty and let's say security. But other than that, it's difficult right now to see anything move beyond the personal way of looking at things. Because normally we should have good relations with Israel, we should have good relations with Egypt, with Saudi Arabia and others, but something is holding us back.
Yeah, and I understand, but on the point of Syria, it doesn't seem that, say, the US or anyone else has such a brilliant strategy either. The Russians have, the Iranians have, but that's also a reactive status quo foreign policy, because from an Iranian perspective, they feared if Assad is gone, they may face ISIS or the US inside Iran and so on. So even so, although I agree with much what you say, Turkey is holding its ground. It is a factor in Syria, and especially on the Kurdish issue with its overlap with domestic security, it's simply something Turkey cannot ignore. What I found so puzzling, however, is that you find a non-state actor, a Kurdish non-state actor with a very explicit anti-Turkish ideology on the side of the US, and even supported, and finding with a very good prestige on the international scene, even very heroic readings of these events. For a while we thought this will be the top #1 priority for Turkish foreign policy for a variety of reasons. Now it seems not to be so important. Could you give us a little bit background on that?
Yeah, well, I think that the most important, let's say, danger at that time was ISIS. Of course, they had gained ground, and the YPG, or this Kurdish group, were fighting them. And since the West and everybody else was happy that they found somebody to fight their war, that's why the YPG got the Western support from the US especially. But for Turkey, we saw the YPG as an extension of the PKK, which is a terrorist organization. They go hand in hand. And of course, Turkey sees this as a very, very important security matter. Therefore, we always criticized those countries that supported the YPG. Right now, things are more, let's say, calmer, because we don't see much in the press. I'm sure things are happening there, but there is a Turkish, let's say, area, or Turkish protected area in which Syrians have gone back. And Turkey has, let's say, built quite a few, let's say, homes for them. But of course, this is a small group. We already have more than 3.5 million Syrians in Turkey. So we don't expect all of them to go back, even if the war is over, because they will not feel secure. Most of their homes are gone. So I think we're going to live with an Arab minority from now on in our country. We have to come to accept this. We will have an Arab minority. But in Syria, it's very difficult to see how this will develop. I think that Assad has won, basically, because on the ground, as we have discussed, Iran has supported it, but not only Iran now, Russia and the YPG. So there is some kind of a coalition already going on with Hezbollah as well. And Assad has survived. Although the country is destroyed in many ways, nevertheless, he has survived. And I think that this is the most crucial point for Russia and Iran. As you pointed out rightly, they don't want him to go because they don't know what's going to come after him if he's gone. So Assad has played a very, the long game, and he has succeeded.
And how much did the Syrian factor distort the relations to the US? Was this the only factor in your view, and to the Europeans? Because one could see there was a time in 2011 where basically all Western powers, including Turkey, were in line. But Assad is about to go, we have to do something, support the opposition. And then out of a sudden, things became totally different and changed. Also, the political language changed.
It's true. I think we made a mistake, all of us, because as you said, we all expected Assad to leave power very soon. And we supported anybody who was against Assad. And we did not, let's say, filter about who was against him. And therefore, we saw a big coalition of various groups, extremists as well, extremists that came from all over the world, not only from Europe, but all over the world, including some from Turkey, who went and crossed over Turkey into Syria and fought him. And then some of these became ISIS. So actually, those who have supported anybody who was fighting against Assad, in a way, created this group or helped this group to be created and then had to be fought. It's very difficult to decide on who you're going to support because everybody was wanting Assad to go as soon as possible so that we can get away from all this illegal migrants, this deprivation of the country. So I don't think that people, including all these countries, took a very clear picture. They didn't have a clear picture of what was really going on, only after it was too late.
Would you say that Turkey is stuck because it has a military presence in Syria? Is it stuck in Syria or does it stay in Syria?
That's a very good point. I think that it's very close to the border, so I don't think we are stuck there. And I think that we're trying to, strengthen the Free Syrian Army, as it's called. And we have created a big wall. It's not the wall like Trump has done. It's a wall between Turkey and Syria, in which we are trying to protect more and more, migrants coming in. But as I said, there's not much that will come in. Idlib was a big problem. We thought that, if that was being assaulted, there would be more and more coming in. But I think that things are more calm now. Nevertheless, Turkey is not in a position to accept more migrants, more refugees, let me say. So I think we're already topped it up by 3.5 million Syrians, and we have 500,000 Iraqis and Afghans and others. We're the #1 country which has the most, let's say, refugees.
Let's go directly to the refugee issue because it's very emotional and almost elections deciding in Europe also. And one of the countries with another heavy burden, I call it this way because it puts the administration and the financial resources to strains, is Greece. And Turkish-Greece relations have always their ups and downs. Both sides understand each other very well and both sides know very well where to push buttons, as you mentioned. Could you give us a little bit more background on the Turkish-Greek relationship, especially with the almost escalation we saw in the Eastern Aegean, and then coming back to the refugee issue and the Europeans' responsibility or our shared co-responsibility?
I mean, Turkey and Greece, we're neighbors. And as neighbors, it's very sometimes difficult to get along, although we should. We sometimes bring out the analogy of look at what France and Germany have done. We've tried to reach that at times. We've done it after 1999 when both countries had an earthquake and helped each other. There was a golden spell in which, Greece was trying to help Turkey with regard to its EU process, for example. But then, governments changed, especially in Greece. And we always have difficulties in the Aegean. For Greece, for them, we have only one issue in the Aegean. For us, we have more. For Greece, Turkey is their #1 concern. You would, if you had been to Greece, you would see the press, the media, always obsessed with Turkey. For us, for Greece is just one issue amongst many. I'm not trying to belittle it. I'm just saying it's a fact because we have too many issues. And we would always like to have good relations with Greece. Again, after 2000, we had started the exploratory talks, which started once again, but they stopped in 2016. And so there was a lull for 5 years. We will always have difficulties, but as long as we have dialogue, we can, at least lower the tension. It will be very difficult to agree on most of the issues. But, the thing that we can always do is agree to disagree on these issues and not make a big fuss out of them. Like the 12-mile, sea, let's say extension of the sea, 12 miles. But they have done it on the West Coast, but they cannot do it on the East Coast because Turkey has said it's casus belli. We can always move away from these things. But, as I said, they have now a different government. Some of them want to move ahead and make progress with us. There are those in the government that want to have a more, let's say, a hard line with us. Same in Turkey. Nationalism is there. it's very difficult to overcome these feelings. So the best we can do is have a dialogue and lower the tension. That's the most important thing that we can do. To come to the migration crisis in 2011, when the Arab popular movement started, of course, the numbers started to come into Turkey. And Turkey was being, saying that, Turkey was doing a great job, although the numbers mushroomed. But when the international, let's say, assistance went to Jordan or Lebanon, not much came to Turkey because they saw that Turkey was doing a great job. Mm-hmm. Only in 2015, the crisis, came about. And I'd like to mention that, when Angela Merkel said that Germany is ready to take in about 1 million or so refugees, then we saw a stream of refugees crossing over from Turkey to Greece. Then the EU came to Turkey and said that, look, let's have a deal. I won't go to the details, but I was in Brussels at that time, and we negotiated 2 agreements in which Turkey would agree to take back all those who went to the Greek islands. It was difficult to reach that deal in the end, but this is something that Turkey accepted. Some people call it immoral. Some people were saying that, look, how can we send back these people back to Turkey? But when they were in Turkey, nobody was complaining. But sending them back to Turkey was not accepted. That was a really strange situation. But Turkey did not see this agreement only purely on migration, in a migration way. We saw it as a way to bring back our relationship, because up until then, there was no movement on the accession process or on basically anything. So the agreements entailed, as I said, customs union, modernizing it, visa liberalization, opening chapters, having an increased dialogue. These were all agreed upon, and especially the visa liberalization was very important for Turkey. We thought that we were going to be able to manage it, and we were going to proceed until June or at least or maximum October of that year. But the coup attempt, destroyed everything. After that, everything was seen in a different light, and the EU used it as an excuse not to fulfill its promises. Yeah. On the visa issue, we had to fulfill 6 more criteria, so I'll leave that aside. But on the customs union, for example, it's a purely commercial deal that would benefit both sides, maybe even more the EU. Nevertheless, the EU used that, what has happened in Turkey with regard to the fundamental rights, judiciary, et cetera, they used that as an excuse not to move ahead on modernizing the customs union. They were claiming that it would be a gift to Erdogan. That was what we were hearing all the time. Mm-hmm. This is pretty a wrong assumption. This would be a benefit for both sides, but they didn't see it that way. And so the relationship got worse and worse. We had another summit, effort of a summit by the Bulgarian presidency. We had a meeting in Varna, but nothing happened there. So the relationship just went from bad to worse, as I said. Then the Eastern Mediterranean issues happened, and we saw the reactions of Turkey, and then the summit, let's say, conclusions. And that's why now the March summit of the EU was going to be important, because they said that they will decide on what to do with regard to what's happening in Turkey. And for the first time, they said that they will be conferring with the US administration on how to proceed. This is something pretty new.
Yeah, that's indeed very new. Before we come to the US, would you say, when I hear that, as you mentioned, the coup attempt destroyed all this negotiating, all this setup, all these agreements. So if we would move forward, there would be no other way than to go back to that peculiar point in time and take this as a starting point from where one has been in the negotiations immediately before the coup, so that both sides, or at least the Turkish side, could move forward. Is that, I think that's a conclusion.
That is a starting point. Mm-hmm. Of course, that is a starting, but of course, but things have changed. Definitely in the last 5 years. For example, when we started to upgrade or negotiate the upgrading of the customs union, we had agreed on 3 points, which was public procurement, services, and agriculture. Mm-hmm. That's dépassé. I mean, that's something that's in the past right now. We might have to add digital economy or some other, sectors. We might even have to narrow down the modernization. So we have to talk again. We have to start technical talks. That has not started yet either.
I see.
Visa as well. So we would like to have more and more EU cooperation, consultation, and help. Let's go beyond the politics and move into the technical sphere and try to move ahead. And that would help, Turkey overcome its mistrust of the EU, because that's another crucial point that we have. Both sides mistrust each other.
Yeah.
Both sides have valid claims according to them. And so we have to find a way to overcome this.
I see. You mentioned it already as a novum, the EU talking with the US about Turkey, which they would have rejected in previous years, more or less. The EU-Turkish relationship is our relationship, our pouvoir. And yes, you said it before, US-Turkish relationships went up and down. And one of the core issues in the last years became the odious S-400 story, which was the reason for headlines like Turkey leaving NATO, potentially becoming an ally of Russia, and so on and so on. On the other hand, more cooler heads would say, well, they are not yet deployed, they are not operational, and how do you manage a Russian air defense system alongside with the basically American Air Force from the machinery? Let us the technical questions aside. The diplomacy of the S-400 seems to be a real big burden now for a restart, a recalibration of the US-Turkish relationship.
Yes, I mean, starting with regard to the US-EU connection, let me say that in the last 20 years, the US has always supported Turkish accession to the EU. Mm-hmm. And when it was very explicit about it, it was criticized by the EU that said that, don't get into our business. This is our area. And they were not happy with US involvement in this issue. And now, as you said, this is something that has changed. It explicitly, for the first time, the EU's actually asking for for US assistance. With regard to the S-400s, it's important to note that yesterday, I read that, for example, our Minister of Defense is talking about how to resolve this issue. Many, many years ago, if you might remember, there was the S-300s,
yes,
which Cyprus had bought them at the time, and we had complained, Turkey had complained about them. Mm-hmm. And therefore, the way out was they were bought by Greece and packed in Crete, in which they have stayed in the crates. So we've heard right now, yesterday, that there's a possibility of doing something similar, not moving it to Greece, but keeping in the crates, something like that, or using them only when necessary. That's a diplomatic way of not using them at all. So I think that now Turkey is trying to find ways in which to overcome this predicament. As I said, this is the charm offensive on various fronts. Of course, Turkey will never move away from, never leave the NATO. That's too important for us. We are still part of the West, despite our differences, despite our rhetoric. The president himself has said that, our future is with the EU. So, I mean, let's say that we have grievances, in fact, if I might use that word, within the family, but if we have a dialogue, we can overcome them.
Yeah, I see some questions from the public. We have posted them here. Can you see them also? Would like to start because it's an important topic with the issue of Russia, Karabakh, and the last Caucasus crisis, and perhaps Turkey's role towards Central Asia. It's from Heide Maria, I see.
Good friend of mine, yes.
Yes, and then you see Günther Rosenic's question on Turkish and Azeri relations, whether there is an idea of a military, diplomatic, economic bloc.
Okay, I've only seen Heide Maria's question, but I can, answer all of them.
Okay,
yes, the Azeri-Armenian conflict was a surprise in many respects, because I guess not many people were expecting a military operation. But the Minsk group and the international diplomatic efforts nothing was happening for the last 30 years. And the military, the Azeri military, was being trained by Turkey. Mm-hmm. So they made a lot of advancements. They bought important material from Israel and some other countries. So they were much better, let's say, in a much better condition than they were 30 years ago. And I guess that they saw, you know, the world in a way in which now the Russians were not much involved in it. There was a transition in the US administration. The time was propitious to move ahead. And I think that they made a calculated risk in using military force to, you know, overcome this. Mm-hmm. And Turkey did support them. I think we did not support them maybe on the ground, but diplomatically, internationally, gave them advice, this and that. And of course, the Armenians suffered for that. It doesn't mean that this has now been resolved. Now we see the Russians, because there's a Russian peacekeeping force in the area. So they are now much closer to Azeri territory. Turkey is also involved. So now we have, again, a Russian and Turkish involvement, cooperation, you might call it, similar that's what's happening in Syria, for example. So this is a very strange situation again, but the two countries have managed to overcome, let's say, the difficulties. I think Azerbaijan was careful not to get into Armenia proper, only they went into Nagorno-Karabakh. So this did not, you know, entail any Russian military involvement against Azeris. They were careful about that. But in the long term, I think Armenia has to decide on what kind of policy it wants to have. It's going to be difficult for them to, you know, swallow all this. So I don't expect any opening. Although Turkey has advanced the same ideas that we should get together and have some diplomatic, let's say, openings, because more or less this issue is being resolved. Up until then, we had tried to overcome the difficulties between the two countries, but Nagorno-Karabakh was a sticking point. Now, more or less, this is resolved. But I don't think Armenia is in a position anytime soon to swallow what has happened and open up any dialogue with Turkey. And now I think that there will be elections in Armenia. And of course, the Armenian diaspora living in France and the US is making life difficult for Armenia itself to, you know, make any overtures towards Turkey. So I don't think that time is the time to move ahead. We'll have to wait a little longer until, you know, things cool down.
Yeah, thank you. And another question was on Turkey as a middle power, about the Turkish bloc together with Central Asia and Azerbaijan. I think this was very fashionable in certain circles in the 1990s. It is something coming mostly from pan-Turanist circles, often from Central Asian origins, Enver Altaylı, and I think, but it sounds a little bit 1970s to me. Yeah, it sounds a little bit like Hergün newspaper and things like that. But still, people talk about it, and obviously so convincingly that some people may take it face value.
How? I mean, this is not going to happen. I mean, we have created the Turkic, let's say, forum or something like that, but most of the countries speak Russian. So there you are. Yes, we have some affinity, but for example, the first thing that they've told us when we opened our embassies, we were, I think, one of the first countries that opened embassies in all those countries. They told us they didn't want another big brother. So yes, we have close relations with them, but that's as far as it goes. I think the closest relations we have amongst those countries is Azerbaijan. But beyond that, it's more or less basically what you would have with Hungary or some other country. You know, good cultural relations, economic relations, political relations, but nothing more than that. We don't act together in the UN. We don't act together as a group. So it's all nice to say these things, but in reality or diplomatically, there's nothing happening.
Yeah, thank you. And another question relates to Iran. Iran potentially becoming a nuclear power. And there have been talks about Turkey, not only to build a nuclear power plant in Turkey, but also for Turkish nuclear armament. At least this has been said by, I think it was a retired official from Turkey. I think it's yeah, Ambassador Martin Seidik asking this.
Oh. Hello to him as well.
Hello. I try. What happens if no? Yeah. I try to open this. I don't know whether you can read it now, but no. So yeah, Iran going nuclear, and perhaps if you could extend it a little bit to the generally to Iran-Turkish relations.
Yeah. Our relationship with Iran, of course, suffered, especially after Khomeini came into power, because the Iranians were trying to export their policies. But I think they've now understood that that's not going to be possible, especially with regard to Turkey. Of course, there's a very important difference between the two countries in religion-wise as well. I mean, they are Shiite and we are Sunni, so it's incompatible, basically. Mm-hmm. We have a good relationship with them. Let's say a good relationship, not an excellent one, but we have supported Iran with regard to this nuclear agreement. For a while, Foreign Minister Davutoglu tried his hand with his Brazilian counterpart when we were members of the Security Council, but I think that we went too far because the US said that, go ahead, try it, but once we made some kind of minor success, it was shot down. So I think that Iran will not have its nuclear bomb, you might say, for any long time. I don't think that Israel or the Americans will allow that. I think the agreement will go on no matter what. People are saying that, what if Iran gets the nuclear bomb, then it might force Turkey to have it as well. It's difficult to say anything about that. I hesitate to agree with that. I doubt if it will happen, but I can't just excuse it in a manner that it will never happen. I doubt it because we don't need it. I think that's the basic answer to that. We don't need a nuclear bomb. I think that would be the closest answer to give. But again, I might be wrong in the future.
Yeah, my former boss just came in, Brigadier General Dr. Walter Feichtinger, whom I greet very heartily. He's asking about Turkish strategic overstretch and questions you whether Turkish foreign policy and strategy is really so reactive after all. One sees Turkey very active in the Caucasus, one sees Turkey very active in Libya. We could add what you mentioned before, the ambitious Africa strategy, even if you say they are there are so many embassies perhaps lacking other strategies, but fact is Turkey is there, which means something at least. And some questions also refer to this definitely end of the famous zero problem policy, which Mr. Davutoglu has remarked. And additionally to this, when would Turkey or will Turkey leave Libya? A little bit a question like mine before, is Turkey stuck there now because the commitments are so great? Or is it just a phase?
Yeah, zero problems with our neighbors. Yeah, we've been joking about that amongst ourselves, saying that zero problems and we don't have, well, anyway, I don't want to go into that. But let me tell you that, yes, in Libya, there was this, again, I would say that there was this reaction towards what was going on because, again, the Muslim Brotherhood. What we're seeing right now are two sides in which even the EU is divided. France and some other countries are supporting Haftar, while the UN is supporting the governments, in which Italy also supports, and Turkey supports, but it is part of the Muslim Brotherhood area. So I think that's one of the reasons why we are there. And I think that we will be there as long as there is no unified government. As long as Haftar is as a danger, I think that we will be staying there. Turkey has, again, I said, reacted to what was going on there. The reaction was, for example, when the Israelis, Egyptians, Greeks, and Cypriots joined together and created this energy forum, Turkey immediately had an agreement with Libya to actually break this line. So again, this was a reaction to what was going on there. I always say that if we had good relations with Israel and Egypt, none of this would have happened. We would have maybe even more control of what was going on in Libya. What we're doing in Africa is more and more economic and commercial deals rather than political, except for Somalia. Somalia is, let's say, a personal pet project of the president. A number of years ago, he went there. He was very much distraught with what he has seen, and therefore he has made it his personal agenda to help that country. The embassy that we have in Mogadishu is the biggest we have in the world, for example. So it's a showcase. But again, I'd like to repeat that, yes, we are more or less moving not in a very strategic way. Things are happening, we are reacting, and it looks as if we are having a strategic point of view. So I would say, if we're going to use the word strategic, it's supporting more or less on an ideological basis.
Yes, but that's, other countries do that too. So quite a lot.
But this is new for us. This is new for us.
This is new for us, yeah, for you. I see. Some questions go to the nexus between domestic politics and foreign policy. Catherine Bastian from the German Marshall Fund asked, could you explain to us in how far Turkish internal politics are a driver to end Turkey's isolation in the international arena, and where it is? Klaus Wölfer asked about the continued crackdown on the Gulenist movements and whether they're so strange. Well, there are quite some other crackdowns going on currently, but while the Gulenists were asked.
Yeah, Turkey uses its isolation in a very negative sense, saying that the whole world is against us and everybody is jealous of us. We're so strong, we're making so much progress that everybody is jealous of us. And they don't want us to be strong. That's the narrative, which is a very negative way of dealing with foreign policy inside the country. But of course, what we have seen from the EU and other countries does not help us either. So the government is basically using all this, what we have heard from foreign countries, even though, for example, they criticize us for the fundamental rights, for the judiciary, for what's happening. Sometimes they're right. Even if they do, the Turkish reaction is, why are they getting involved in our internal process? The latest is what's happening in Bosphorus University.
Yeah.
The US and other countries have criticized Turkey on, slapping the students with certain crimes, calling them terrorists. And the foreign ministry has made a very strong, strange statement that wouldn't have been there a number of years ago. So we are losing professionalism in our foreign service as well. The foreign ministry, if I may say, that is now being less and less involved in foreign policy. It's more acting what has been given to them, rather than being in the foreign policy making process. This has changed. So foreign policy is used in a negative way in Turkey for internal purposes to nationalize the movements and strengthen, let's say, the people towards a certain policy.
I see. It is quite similar sometimes to more Middle Eastern countries, where much foreign policy decision making and visioning about and planning is done in a palace or in the president's courts or at the supreme leader's office as a last stand. And that seems to be really a big difference, a deviation from what has been done the last years. Would you say that this is perhaps a break in the Republican tradition where you had these checks and balances? Because for all what went wrong in Turkey in the last 40, 50 years with coups and military government and so on, there was always this strong Republican tradition of you don't come simply into a high position because you're somebody's friends. That's for purely political, but the basic administration was always highly professional and highly politically neutral.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, because professionalism and, you know, without being affiliated to any party has gone. I mean, because it's the first time that we're seeing a government or a party in power for so long. Until then, we've had, you know, more or less coalitions, the government's coming and going. So they never had maybe a chance to ingrain themselves into the bureaucracy. But now we've seen the bureaucracy now politicized or defanged, if I may use that word, with regard to being, you know, more and more professional. If you are closer to the government, then you can get a good job. People that are used to be more capable are being sidelined or not listened to. We've seen that, as I said, in the foreign policy area, but also in the economic area. We've seen what happened with the central bank. And when the mistakes are there, I think the government had to retract and go back into areas in which they were not very happy with, but they had to move in the way that they thought that they would never go back again. Now I understand that even that is happening in the foreign policy area. Why do we have this charm offensive? Because they understood that isolation is not a good thing. Some of them called them the splendid isolation. We heard that word, if you remember. But it's not as splendid as some people thought.
Yes, indeed, it is not. Yeah, I think we've answered this question, which just came in, what the role of domestic institutions in foreign policy may do for the last decade, and that government institutions getting less and less relevant. Perhaps talking about Turkish policy was in the last 20 years always, and that was, I guess, a big novelty, talking with Turkish scholars, with Turkish academia, with Turkish diplomats, a variety of think tanks from Turkey engaged on a highly professional level with the whole world, basically. In a way, nothing changed because there are a lot of think tanks active until now. And then still a lot of things changed, almost everything. I remember freer debates, I remember more critical debates, and I remember better informed debates also from the European side. I mean, there was some kind of a liberal Europhobia on Turkey, Turkey joining the EU, and we will become, I don't know, even more important than we were. And now it's almost, I don't want to say that Turkey is responsible for everything which goes wrong from the Middle East to everywhere, but it's much more critical. And do you think that we are losing focus of how to move forward from the point where we are now to the next steps, both on the Turkish and the European side, both on the think tank and the professional side?
Yeah, I think that we have to look at the longer vision. We're sometimes narrowing on, you know, what we do with the EU, what we do with the Middle East, with Russia. But we have to look about where we will be in 5 or 10 years' time. Both Turkey and the EU, especially the West and Turkey, they need each other. I've seen recently that we are de-Westernizing Turkey, and that's a danger, because I always felt that I was part of the West. That's how I grew up. I still feel that way. And I think that we are part of the West, nevertheless. And that's why maybe the president had said recently that our future is with the EU. So maybe he's now turning back the clock, and maybe he has understood certain things, but we have to see whether he implements what he has promised with regard to the political reforms, just as he has done with some economic reforms. So the jury is out. But as you're right, we have to look about how we can move ahead. For example, we're stuck on accession. I've been dealing with Turkey-EU relations for the last 25 years. And it's a knee-jerk reaction to be part of the EU. But it's not going to happen. Let's be realistic. It's not going to happen. But we can still have a sustainable, sensible relationship with the EU in which we have, let's say, a modernized customs union, we have visa-free travel, and we have good cooperation on foreign policy. We can overcome the differences. But we have to understand where we're going to be in 5-10 years' time. Accession could happen one day, but it's not going to happen because the EU, most of the countries, do not want Turkey as a member of the EU for a number of reasons. And some of them are legitimate. I would understand that. Turkey is too big. Turkey has a population that would be the same size as Germany. It would have the same rights as Germany. Okay, we get that. But again, it doesn't mean that we cannot have a sustainable relationship. We should try to find something, that's why we need a dialogue of, which is honest, an honest policy in which the think tanks and civil society should also be involved.
Yeah.
We should move away from the rhetoric. We should move away from ideology and think in more realistic terms. Things change. For example, who would have expected the Soviet Union to collapse? So we don't know what will happen in the future. But in the meantime, let's get together and have a more cooperative, sustainable relationship without the rhetoric. And I think that goes for not only governments, but civil society and think tanks as well. We have to look at the long vision.
Yeah, I don't want to go into the issue of domestic issues in Austria and in Germany with the sizable Turkish communities, which whether people admit it or not, do color a little bit the understanding of politics in our country. But what I wonder is when the UK left the European Union, there were for a moment some talks about to get an extra relationship, a strategic one, perhaps together with Turkey, perhaps a new free trade arrangement or so. We haven't heard too much about that, but fact is that Turkey and the UK are very strong, definitely militarily, definitely regional powers. Is there any tendency, have these overtures been welcomed or accepted by Turkey, or has this been something which was mentioned once and then rather forgotten?
Well, to start off, Brexit was a very negative thing for Turkey because we lost, let's say, an advocate, the strongest country that would support Turkey inside the EU. So once that happened, we lost a very strong supporter. That's the first thing. People have used, Brexit as an analogy that Turkey could have some kind of relationship similar to that. And I looked at the Brexit agreement. Institutionally, they're following the same line as what we have with the EU. They also have, not an association council, but a partnership council, and they have a number of committees. So they're following the same line, but again, this shows that they're treating the UK as a third country, and Turkey is being treated in a similar way. I've always thought that the EU doesn't want Turkey too close or too far. The customs union is as far as it gets. Yes, beyond that, we've started open negotiations, but nothing substantial has happened since then. And to be very cynical, maybe Cyprus was accepted as a member because that would stall Turkey indefinitely. I'm just throwing that out. But we have now good relations with the UK, and the UK is more free to engage with Turkey. That's true, but we have to wait until and see how the UK engages with the EU and whether we can cooperate with them. One thing that we can do together is with regard to this conference on the future of Europe. This future of Europe is something that we don't like the name of it. The future of the EU, okay, we understand, but if it's going to be the future of Europe, then it should involve Turkey, the UK, Switzerland, Norway, even maybe Russia. So either they change the name of the conference or they should involve us as well.
I see. That's an interesting point because it's often overlooked. Because when I rethink the way we talk about Turkey, it is about either Turkey in the Middle East or Turkey doing in the Balkans what we don't want them to do, or they do what we want to do, but it's the same thing, so we are confused, or accession, which no one says the word no, but everybody means no. Yeah. So this would be a real way out, but, or a way out, or another way to go, what you've been sketching out, because there are these third countries which are so close to Europe that you just cannot close the curtain or close the border or just pretend they would not be here. Thank you very much for this. I don't know exactly how much time we still have.
I'm at home, so.
So am I, so I don't go anyway. So we may continue. Perhaps we should bring up another topic, which I don't think that it's the core issue of Turkish foreign and domestic politics, but it's a core issue, an important issue, and in Europe, especially highly emotionalized. And that is the whole Kurdish issue, or whatever it is called. We saw under the Erdogan government a negotiations processes which I thought was fraught with problems, because on one hand, the debate about cultural rights and the question whether someone constitutes an ethnic minority according to OSCE or not is difficultly answered by different European countries anyway. But there was a process which was basically a civil society demand. On the other hand, this disbanding and making a peace or a ceasefire with the guerrilla organization, which is on the terror list, is an entire different story. So you had basically two processes in one, which plus the whole Syria issue. Now it comes up, it is an irritant, has always been an irritant between EU countries and Turkey. And how do you see here the relationship? Because on the other hand, it's not even a secret, the relationship to Erbil, between Ankara and Erbil, is very good, and for a long time already. It's not only to Erdogan. Perhaps you could figure out a little bit the Erdogan factor in all this, because some say it was only the fact that such a process started was only thanks to the president's initiatives. Others say he torpedoed it, what is your take of it?
Well, I mean, this issue, of course, is a very complex issue. And ever since I've started at the Foreign Ministry, it has always entangled us. You know, for a while, the official line was there are no Kurds in Turkey. So we made quite a leap of progress since then. And for us, of course, the official line, again, is that the Kurds are not a minority. They're part of the, because for us, minorities are religious minorities and not ethnic minorities. Nevertheless, it has always been a difficult issue. You know, several governments have tried to resolve it militarily because of what the PKK has done. And Erdogan has tried his hand on, you know, peace offerings, and he did make some progress, but this was torpedoed by the PKK. Let's say the party that supports, or more, let's say, let's call it the Kurdish party, could not absolve itself from the PKK. If it had done so, it could have made more progress. It made some headway with regard to elections. It got more than 10%. It could have gotten more if it distanced itself from the PKK. It could not. But again, the official line, and one I would support, is that we don't have a problem with the Kurds per se, but we have a problem with the terrorists. And as you rightly pointed out, we have a very good relationship with Erbil. For a while, that also was difficult, but Erdogan made a promising move, and now that's a showcase. We have excellent relations there. We are, commercial relations. We have made that area sparkling, building, construction. So, that's a totally different situation. But when you come to Syria, the relationship with the PKK is again, an impediment. What we see in Iraq is that they have distanced themselves already from the PKK. Maybe there's a connection, but it's very, very loose and we don't see it. if the YPG had done the same, because there was at the time, again, the leader of the YPG came to Turkey and had some talks in Turkey. It went nowhere, and that's why it, the relationship went bad again. So for us, it's basically a terrorist issue, a security issue. Other than that, a lot of people would claim that they are Kurds, but they have no problems. The government has given more and more cultural rights. It should do more. There's more and more education, but we don't have maybe a Kurdish university, for example. That could come in a later stage. But I have to agree that we have made a lot of progress since I entered the Foreign Service, for example. We could do more, but we have to resolve the security matter first before we can move ahead. So it's a very thin line between security and resolving identity and all these things. So there's much more to do.
I see. If we should come to the end now, and I would ask you, could you just very shortly summarize one aspect? Where should the EU and Turkey, how should both sides immediately start right now? Because one always can argue we have to wait for better times until this and that has resolved, or these and that elections. But right now, you mentioned already more contacts between think tanks, but right now, what would you think where both sides should move immediately to move forward in this stalemate we are now?
Well, there's never a time better than now. You're right. We have to move ahead, and both sides have to make an effort. Not only the EU, but Turkey as well. We have to actually implement what we're saying, because right now we have outlined our political reforms on human rights, something that should have been done already many years ago, but we've, unfortunately regressed. So if we can go back to our original reforms and implement them, that would be one important step with regard to building trust. At the same time, the EU should start technical talks on the customs union, help us with regard to the visa process, and have dialogues, regular dialogues. Let me explain. Up until 2004, Turkey was always invited to the summits, the EU Council meetings. That stopped after 2004 and started again only in 2015, when we had the migration crisis. In 4 months, we had 3 summits, the 28 plus Turkey, because Turkey was needed. This should not happen because there is a need for this kind of meeting. It should be more regular, just as the EU has had regular contacts with third countries. We should not, if the EU has these kinds of contacts with third countries, it should have it with the candidate as well. They get together with the Balkan countries, but this is an important country I would consider for the EU. So every 6 months, there should be a leadership meeting, high-level meetings. Turkey is not invited anymore, for example, to the Gimnik meetings, the foreign ministers' meetings. I mean, the Turkish foreign minister, up until recently, was invited to these meetings. Maybe nothing much happened, but at least there was more networking, getting together, hearing firsthand the concerns of both sides. This was important. So we have to go back to high-level talks, high-level contacts, but also technical talks as well. So let's start step by step on both sides and try to build the trust again. And again, look at the longer game and see where we want to be, because having this discrepancy between the two sides does not help either side. It helps Russia. Let's be frank. I mean, Russia benefits from the situation. I remember that in Cyprus, for example, when we were getting close to a settlement, I'm sure that there was some kind of Russian involvement that prevented this from happening, because if we had resolved Cyprus issue, then we would have gotten much, much closer to the EU. And that would have, changed the landscape. But right now, this dichotomy, this division is not helping either side.
So let's get started before Russia gets the best of us. Thank you, Ambassador. I wish you a very nice evening in Istanbul. İyi akşamlar and share Posch.
Thank you very much. And all the best to my colleagues that I cannot see from Vienna. I hope to be able to see them once this pandemic is, overcome.
Yeah, I hope so too. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Gertrude.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
To all my good friends.
Thank you.